The vigil had been aground for as long as anyone in Groins End could remember, and my mother used to say it would still be there, after the town itself washed out to sea. It sat half buried in the tide-flat mud at low water, 300 meters of dead gray hull, its underside crusted with barnacles and rust bloom, its upper deck stripped bare by 40 years of salvage crews working it the way gulls work a carcass. By the time the compact handed our yard the final breakdown contract, there wasn't much dignity left to strip. Just the hard parts. The bones. I'd been cutting into her for 6 years, long enough to know her corridors by feel in the dark, long enough to know which frame still held current, and which had gone cold decades back. My father used to run this yard before his knees gave out, and before him it was his father, and I'd grown up climbing in and out of the vigil's ribs the way other kids climb trees. Nobody in Groins End called her a warship anymore. They called her the Hulk. They called her Scrap standing up. The compact's record said she'd carried a crew called wardens, once. Some kind of enforcement order, bonded to the ship and to each other, sent wherever the old scattered settlements needed a judgment nobody local could make without bias. The record said the order was disbanded generations back, folded quietly into history when the compact decided the settlements didn't need wandering arbiters anymore. They needed one law from one center. I never thought much about it. A dead title for a dead crew on a dead ship. We were paid by the ton, not the story. My crew boss, a heavy-set man named Otis who'd outlived 2 knee replacements and 3 yard owners, liked to say the vigil was the only honest job left in Groins End, because a hull that size never lied about how much work it still had in it. We came in before dawn most days, 6 of us in patched coveralls, and worked the tide schedule instead of the clock. I liked that a stuck bolt didn't care who your family was, only whether you knew how to ask it right. I'd heard the old stories the way everyone in a yard town hears them, second-hand and half-mocking, that the wardens answered to something older than any one settlement, that the ship herself chose who rode with her, and no record ever explained how. Otis liked to joke that if the old Hulk ever woke up looking for a warden, she'd have to settle for whoever was closest with a torch. Nobody meant anything by it. It was just yard talk. The morning it happened, I was 3 decks down, working alone, because nobody else on the crew would go that deep anymore. The lower hull held a chamber we'd nicknamed the Vault, a round room at the ship's spine, walled in plating none of our cutters could touch, sealed behind a hatch that hadn't opened in living memory. Company wanted it opened before the final breakdown. Company wanted to know what was worth so much armor. I'd tried the hatch a dozen ways over the years. Torches, jacks, a borrowed breach charge that scorched the plating and did nothing else. That morning I wasn't trying anything clever. I was just tired and cold, and I set both hands on the old wheel lock the way I always did, without thinking about it. Left hand pressing flat and steady, right hand giving the short double twist my mother taught me on stuck valves when I was 9 years old, sink pipes and tractor caps, and every stubborn bolt in her toolbox. She'd learned it from her mother. I never asked where it started. It was just the family way of asking a thing to let go. The wheel lock didn't move, but something under it did. A hum came up through the deck plates, so low I felt it in my back teeth before I heard it. Then light, not the flicker of a dying cell, but a clean, deliberate blue, tracing itself along seams in the wall I'd have sworn were just wear lines. The glyphs ran in a slow circuit around the chamber door, brightening as they went, like something waking up, joint by joint, after a long, cold sleep. I stepped back. I am not ashamed to say that. Compact registry, closed, a voice said, from everywhere and nowhere, even and unhurried, like it had all the time in the world, and had just remembered what time was for. Warden registry, closed, crew, none living, query. I didn't answer. I don't think I could have. That motion, it said, left flat, right double, show me again. My hands were already shaking, but I did it. Pressed the wheel lock the same way. Left then, the short twist right. The exact motion I'd used on 1,000 stuck bolts, without once wondering why it worked when nothing else did. The hum deepened. The hatch, which hadn't moved in longer than my father had been alive, sighed open on a breath of cold, clean air that smelled nothing like the rest of the ship. No rust, no rot, no 40 years of tide-flat damp. Just metal and stone and something like ozone. Inside, the chamber held a single column of dark glass, taller than I was, veined through with the same slow blue light, pulsing now like something with a heartbeat. Not a statue, not a machine, not exactly. It felt, the way a held breath feels, like a thing in the process of deciding. "That motion is not company training," the voice said. "It is not in any manual we issued. It is older than the manuals. Where did you learn it?" "My mother," I said. My voice came out smaller than I wanted. "Her mother before that. It's how you free something that's been stuck too long. You don't force it. You ask it twice, gentle, then firm." "Yes," it said, and for the first time there was something under the word that wasn't just machine patience. Something closer to grief, or relief, or both at once. "That is the latch right. It was taught hand to hand, mother to daughter, master to apprentice, never written, because the wardens knew records burn, and orders get disbanded, and titles get struck from the books. But emotion taught by hand survives what paper doesn't. It was built to outlast us. It has." The blue light gathered, drew itself down the column and out, and settled. I felt it settle, like weight laid gently on my shoulders, somewhere just behind my sternum, warm, where the ship's cold had been. "I searched for that motion for 6 years, while you walked my corridors with a cutting torch," it said. "I did not know it would come back to me on the last hull in the yard, from the last hand still willing to ask instead of force. The compact struck us from its registry. It could not strike the hands. Wren Calder, warden's hands, Justice Wakes. I don't remember sitting down, but I remember the deck was cold under me, and I remember laughing once, short and startled, a trick for stuck valves, taught in a kitchen, by women who never once told me it meant anything but don't force it, ask it right. "I'm not a warden," I said, when I could talk again. "I strip hulls for scrap money. I don't judge anybody's cases. I don't know your law." "You kept the right when the law was gone," it said. "That was always the harder part. The judging can be taught, the keeping cannot. It has to survive in hands that have every reason to forget it, and don't." I sat with that a long time, in the cold blue light, with the hum of something ancient, breathing steady again after 40 years of silence. I thought about my mother's hands teaching me that motion, and hers before that, never knowing it was the last unbroken link in something the whole compact had declared extinct. I asked it, eventually, what happens now? Whether there was some other office I'd have to fill, some role waiting to be handed to me, the way a title gets handed down along with a house or a debt. The light dimmed a little, thoughtful, the way a person goes quiet before they answer something honestly instead of easily. "Now you decide what the right is for," it said. "I can tell you what it was. I cannot tell you what you'll make of it. The law gave the wardens a door. It never told them what to do once it opened. Some spent a lifetime and never used it. Some used it once, and it was enough. When I finally climbed back up through the vigil's ribs, the tide had turned, the way it always does, indifferent to hulks and orders, and the small stubborn things that outlive them both. Otis was on deck, waiting, because I'd been gone longer than any breakdown job should take. He took one look at my face, and didn't ask the question he was clearly holding. I didn't have an answer for it yet anyway. I still work the yard. The compact's breakdown contract on the Vigil got quietly canceled, and nobody in the office explained why, and I never volunteered to. She still sits in the tide-flat mud at low water. I still climb down most mornings, though not with a cutting torch. I go down to listen. Some days she has nothing to say. Some days she tells me about a dispute long since forgotten by everyone but her, and I sit on the cold deck plates and let her be heard all the way through. because that had waited longer for less. And some things, once they finally let go, deserve to be held before you ask them to carry weight again.